Hello and welcome to the Pilgrim Way. My name is Norman Graham and I'm a minister in the Baptist Union of Churches in Scotland. The aim of these signposts is to try and help to connect the text of the Bible with our everyday lives. Today I'm going to read a well-known story from the Gospel of Luke, in Luke chapter 15, the story of the prodigal son. There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. And so he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered all your property with prostitutes, comes home, well, you kill the fatted calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you're always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" Excuse me. In Luke 15, the scribes and Pharisees criticized Jesus for welcoming and eating with tax collectors and sinners. Luke's gospel in particular shows Jesus eating with sinners often. And the sinners are kind of lumped together as one group without any specific sins being identified. That is except for tax collectors, who were universally reviled by Jews. And they were seen as traitors for working with the Romans. The point is that they were the kind of people that the righteous person would avoid at all costs, so as not to become spiritually contaminated by their sinfulness. So Jesus' constant eating with sinners was a real problem for the religious types of his day. Scholar Joachim Jeremias says that to understand the reaction of the scribes and Pharisees, we need to realise that in the East, to invite a man to a meal was an honour. It was an offer of peace, trust, brotherhood and forgiveness. In short, sharing a table meant sharing life. Jesus' table fellowship with people considered sinners by the religious types demonstrated his unconditional acceptance and welcome of them. But it was a problem for those who preferred strict boundaries between themselves and people they considered sinners. And he defends his actions by telling three stories, one of which is the much-loved story of the lost or prodigal son. And our affection for that story can cause us to miss the full impact of the offence of grace that it dramatically conveys. The standard kind of evangelical Christian interpretation goes something like this. The Father represents God who loves and forgives sinners. The younger son represents sinners in general, but actually is often understood to represent former believers who have backslidden and abandoned the faith. The elder brother represents people like the scribes and the Pharisees, unwilling to welcome the penitent sinner back. At best, that's an oversimplistic understanding of the story, and at worst, it misses the whole point. We should note that the primary focus of the parable is the vastness of God's love for the lost and his exuberant, extravagant, and outrageous joy in heaven when those who are lost have been found. The greatest sermon ever preached on this parable is the famous painting by Rembrandt, the master of biblical painting, and we'll use that a bit to help us today. In most evangelical preaching of the story, the younger son is the villain. He is the prodigal who returns home in disgrace. A return, of course, requires a leaving, and this is why he's the villain. The extraordinary joy of the father at welcoming the son back hides the immense sorrow that has gone before. Just as in other parables in this series, the finding has a losing in the background. The returning has a leaving under its cloak. If we are to understand the deep mystery of the vastness of the Father's compassion, then we have to look closely at the sorrow that the leaving caused. The sorrow of the Father is not only in the leaving, but also in the request by the Son for his inheritance. Modern Westerners find it difficult to understand the depth of the offence of the Son's request, as it would have been understood in Jewish culture into which Jesus was speaking. The son not only asked for his division of the inheritance, but implied in that request he also asked for the right to dispose of it as he wished. Scholar Kenneth Bailey notes that even after signing over his possessions to his son, the father still had the right to live off the proceeds, as long as he is alive. Here the younger son gets, and thus is assumed to have demanded disposition to which even more explicitly he has no right until the death of the father. The implication of "Father, I cannot wait until you die" underlines both requests. The son's leaving then is the cruelest of actions and reveals the cause of the father's deepest sorrow, for no wound cuts a father deeper than his son wishing him dead. The son's request is also a rejection of his heritage, of the culture and traditions of his people, and all that he has been taught was right as a member of the community. It's a rejection of a way of living that has been handed down for generations. It's a betrayal of the treasured values of both family and community. The distant country to which he will journey, therefore, represents the world in which everything considered holy at home is disregarded. His leaving home was a denial that he belonged at home. In the context of the parable, it means a rejection or denial of the spiritual reality that we belong to God. It's a denial of the truth that God holds me safe in an eternal embrace, that I am indeed carved in the palms of God's hands and hidden in their shadows. If the younger brother represents us in any way, it is that we become like him whenever we search for happiness and unconditional love where it cannot be found. For they can only truly be found in the presence of the Father. Yet here is the mystery of the Father's love. The younger son is loved so much that he is free to leave home. The Father will not impose his will or force love from us. He loves us enough to let us go our own way. We are free to leave home and to keep on leaving. Yet the Father is always looking for us with outstretched arms to receive us back and whisper to us, "You are my beloved." The young man who returns to his father is, in many ways, not the same young man who left. He left with money and possessions, determined to live the high life, but returned in poverty, without honour, self-respect, and without reputation. Even his head was shaven. Everything he had taken with him had been squandered and lost. Rembrandt's painting of the son reveals it all. His clothes are no more than rags that barely cover his emaciated body. The father wears a rich red cloak, giving him status and dignity. The kneeling son has no cloak. The yellow-brown torn undergarment just covers his exhausted, worn-out body from which all strength is gone. The soles of his feet tell the story of a long and humiliating journey. The left foot slipped out of its worn sandal is scarred. The right foot, only partially covered by a broken sandal, also speaks of suffering and misery. Rembrandt shows us a young man who has lost everything. He was so destitute that he took a job feeding pigs, something no self-respecting Jew would even contemplate. It reveals the depths to which he had sunk after squandering his money and then being caught up in the natural disaster of famine. Here is someone who has reached rock bottom. If the younger son represents the sinners and tax collectors with whom Jesus shares table fellowship, the elder brother represents the scribes and Pharisees who are furiously offended at Jesus' behaviour. They are the target of his story. It's an arrow intended to pierce their hearts. The truth of that should give us pause, for they are the ones who had a real zeal for the word of God. They were serious about obeying his commands, the very claims of evangelical Christians today. In Rembrandt's painting, the elder brother stands off to one side, hands clasped in front of him, standing stiffly upright in stark contrast to the loving, stooped embrace of the father. The space between the elder son and the group of father and brother reflects a tension in the relationship, and the distance between them is painful. The lostness of the elder son is as hidden as the lostness of the younger son is obvious. Yet it breaks forth in his reproach to his father. Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. The word looks very disrespectful, totally lacking in the normal social etiquette for addressing an older person, but especially a relative. It's like saying to his father, "Look, you." Henry Nouwen notes that these are words of complaint that come from a heart that feels it has never received what it was due. It's a heart that not only condemns others, but it also is self-condemning and is trapped in a cycle of deep-seated resentment. He was angry, and like his younger brother, he shamed his father. Not by leaving home, but by refusing to join the celebration, forcing his father to go outside to speak to him when it should have been the other way around. For the elder brother, the music and dancing, instead of inviting to joy, become a cause for even greater withdrawal. Joy and resentment don't mix, which is why resentful people are usually deeply unhappy. To be resentful and bitter is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. The elder son's inner complaint would not allow him to enter into the joy of his father. In his lostness, he was not willing to let himself be found. His resentment had blinded him to the father's love. He's tried to earn the father's love by being a dutiful son. His years of service weren't motivated by love, but by hope that by behaving correctly, he would get the reward of his inheritance. In his own way, he disgraced the father as much as his younger brother had. The father is the real focus of the painting and of the story, which gives more attention to the father and his reaction than to the son's return. Henry Nouwen notes that in the painting, the soft yellow-brown of the son's underclothes looks beautiful when seen in rich harmony with the red of the father's cloak. But in truth of the matter is that the son is dressed in rags that betray the great misery that lies behind him. In the context of a compassionate embrace, our brokenness may appear beautiful, but our brokenness has no other beauty but the beauty that comes from the compassion that surrounds it. It's often been noted that the Father's hands in the painting are quite different from one another, and that they provide the true centre of the painting. The light is concentrated on them. The bystanders are looking to them. The left hand is strong and muscular, covering the Son's shoulder. This hand not only touches, but it holds firmly. The right hand is more refined and feminine and lies gently on the Son's shoulder, caressing it. The Father confirms the Son's welcome at his breast and also consoles the Son in his sorrow for his sins. There is no hint of judgment or rejection, and the scene is one of deep peace, with the prodigal resting in his Father's bosom. Why is it that we're so afraid sometimes to come home to the Father? Do we picture God as a stern authority figure who can't wait to point out our failures and failings and punish us for them? The thing is, the Father's authority is the authority of compassion, the authority that comes from letting the sins of his children pierce his heart. There is no lust, greed, anger, resentment, jealousy, or vengeance in his lost children that has not caused immense grief to his heart. From a deep inner place where love embraces all human grief, the Father reaches out to his children, the touch of his hands radiating inner light that seeks only to heal. In Rembrandt's painting, the Father and the prodigal are lit up with soft light that almost seems to come from within the scene, whilst the elder son stands at the edge of the light, in the shadows, unable to step into the light of the Father's love and the prodigal's peace. There is no desire for revenge in the Father's heart. There is only joy at the Son's return. Jesus presents us not only with the offence of grace of the Father's extravagant, unconditional love towards both his sons. The Father's grace is offensive because it rejects the eye for an eye attitude that deep down we think is right. Tim Keller suggests that with this story, Jesus is redefining everything we thought we knew about connecting with God. He's redefining sin and what it means to be lost and what it means to be saved. According to Jesus, sin is not just breaking the rules. It's putting yourself in the place of God as Saviour, Lord and Judge, just as each son sought to displace the authority of the Father in their own lives. Through this parable, Jesus shows us that to be lost is to reject the embrace of the Father in exchange for the treasures and pleasures of the world. But it is also to seek to earn the embrace of the Father through our moral uprightness and religious rule-keeping. As Keller puts it, the Father not only loves the wild, living, free-spirited people, but also the hardened, religious people. To be found, then, is to reject both wild living and moral self-righteousness. It is to understand that the Father invites us into his embrace and to learn to rejoice when others are welcomed into that loving embrace. Jesus' story famously doesn't have a neat ending. Readers are left on the edge of their seats wondering what will happen. Will the elder brother respond and be reconciled with his father and brother? We don't know. Jesus leaves the question hanging in the air. However, I think that the open-endedness of the parable is itself an invitation to us to ask ourselves what we would do if we were in the elder son's shoes. I think it was Keller who said that the church has more elder brothers than it knows. The story of the lost sons has much to say to us about our own relationship with the Father, but it also has a missional impetus. For whilst we may relate to one degree or another to both sons, the challenge that Jesus sets before us is not only that we would step into the unconditional loving embrace of the Father, but also that we would become more like the Father in our welcome of anyone we think of as lost. Jesus said, "Be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate." The extravagantly outrageous and compassionate love that we have experienced in the embrace of the Father invites us to show that same extravagant, unconditional, and compassionate love to others, and to do all that we can to help them to know that to be home is to be in the embrace of the Father. It is to be welcome. Thanks for listening.